I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. Billy, today we have topics about water.
Yes, I am so excited about today. I was in class earlier today, and I was talking to somebody, and they said about 80% of Americans get their water from forested watersheds, right? So we'll let Dr. Gumbert maybe chime in on that in a minute. But point being, water and trees, they all come together, and this is a water episode, right? In many ways, right? So we've got Dr. Amanda Gumbert on. She's going to be talking about World Rivers Day, which is really pretty cool, right? And then we have Dr. Matt Springer on. He's going to be talking about river otters here in Kentucky. And then we have Mr. John Duvall on. He's the current president of the Kentucky Maple Syrup Association. And he's going to be talking about sweet water, right? That's something that's really sweet that comes out of maple trees and how important that is, and some of the stuff going on with maple syrup here in the state. So water themed, but always grounded in trees, right? So
there you go. You got it.
We're glad to have everybody with us. You can use the chat function to interact with our presenters today, or if you're on YouTube, you can hit us up on email at forestry.extension@uky.edu, and we can respond that way. But delighted to have our guests with us. Delighted to be with you, Renee, and thank you all for being here today as well.
Definitely. So let's go ahead and get started. So Dr. Gumbert, welcome to the show again. We greatly appreciate you being on.
Yeah.
Hi, absolutely. I will say also, Billy, that I believe that my favorite way to have water, at least one of them, is maple syrup. So
there you go.
There you go.
No doubt. Good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
We greatly appreciate you joining us, and going to be talking about World Rivers Day.
Yes, and let me get myself.
And Dr. Gumbert, as you're getting ready, it is so good seeing that UKFNR extension underneath your name. And
I love it.
Just so glad that you're part of this team here. So.
Oh, well, thank you all so much. I am getting ready. Here we go. I'm going to talk about World Rivers Day a bit this morning, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks. And you might go, well, what on earth is World Rivers Day? It feels like every day there's some special thing that we're celebrating, event of the day. But World Rivers Day is an annual celebration that is celebrated on the fourth Sunday in September. So this year it's September 24th. And it began in 2005, really as a response to the United Nations launching the Water for Life decade. And so this is something, of course, that decade has now passed, but World Rivers Day has carried on. And so it's just a way for us to acknowledge that we have a lot of great water resources, and also that we need to take care of them. So what I thought we would do today is not just look at rivers of the world, but really look at Kentucky's rivers. So we're going to do a little investigation of our major river basins. So this is a map of those river basins that you're seeing on your screen. The Kentucky Division of Water is responsible for monitoring and assessing our water quality in Kentucky. And I think if you've heard me talk before, you've heard me say we are very rich in water resources. You know that probably from your own experience. But the Kentucky Division of Water has teams that monitor our water resources. They report that back every 2 years to Congress as part of adherence to the Clean Water Act. So part of that coordination is an effort to organize and figure out who's doing what in which basins. And so we kind of do that on a watershed scale. And in Kentucky, we have 7 major river basins, and these are big watersheds, but areas of land in those different colored regions, that you see on your screen, all drain to one common location. So we're going to explore those quickly and briefly, and just know that I only have a few seconds for each one. So there's tons of stuff that happens in each of those basins, and we have such a diverse landscape. But we're going to start with the Big Sandy River Basin, which is in the far eastern part of Kentucky. And the image you're seeing here is a picture of Nathan Alexander, and he's our Big Sandy River Basin Coordinator. So part of what these basin coordinators do is they help to identify places in the watershed that either need protection or maybe they need a bit of restoration and they need a little more effort put toward them. And so they kind of coordinate activities that happen there. Typically, there's a basin team. So a team of natural resources managers, of landowners, of elected officials that will be active in the watershed and help to make decisions for how activities happen there in those watersheds. So this is Big Sandy. You see the counties that are included there. And many of you may be familiar with Breaks Interstate Park. And so that is located in the Big Sandy watershed. And the Big Sandy forms from the confluence of the Levisa Fork, which comes out of Virginia, and the Tug Fork that comes out of West Virginia. Those meet up at Louisa in Lawrence County and forms the Big Sandy River, and that flows on into the Ohio River. So the area is well known for some timber, of course. As you see in this picture, you see lots of timber in the background there. But historically, there's been mining, coal extraction, as well as timber harvest. So that's part of the bigger industries there historically, and that shaped the landscape to some degree, and also culturally home to the Hatfield and McCoy feuds. So that's the Big Sandy River Basin in the far eastern part of the state. Now we're going to move a little bit on a westerly direction over to the Licking River Basin. And Brian Storrs is our basin coordinator for the Licking River. And I will just say that these basin coordinators, in my opinion, have one of the most impossible tasks because they're supposed to know all of the stuff water related that's going on in their whole basin. And that's a really big geographic stretch. So for the Licking River, headwaters are in Magoffin County, and the water flows in a northwesterly direction toward its mouth, which is between the towns of Covington and Newport in northern Kentucky. So just across the Ohio River from Cincinnati is where the Licking River dumps into the Ohio River. So lots of variability in the landscape that happens along that basin. And I will have to say that it might be one of my favorites. I grew up in the Licking River, and so I personally think that Licking River water tastes really good, but that's neither here nor there. But the Licking River is a really diverse ecosystem as far as mussels. There are lots of mussel beds there. Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources has done some mussel restoration work in the Licking River. This is a picture of two bridges at Blue Licks, which is noted as one of the last battles of the Revolutionary War fought at Blue Licks. So there's a state park there, and that's just a little nugget about the Licking River. So moving on over to the Kentucky River, the headwaters of the Kentucky River are in Letcher County, and then all the water, the north, south, and middle forks come together, and the river moves on and eventually makes its way to Carrollton, where it joins up with the Ohio River. So you're probably familiar a bit with the topography of Kentucky, and the whole state of Kentucky kind of tilts a bit such that the highest elevation is in the southeastern part of the state, and all of our water flows in sort of a northwesterly direction. And so the Kentucky River is no different. It also is the home, of course, home watershed of the University of Kentucky. Our main campus in Lexington is in the Kentucky River Basin. And lots of different land uses and uses of the river happen along the way. And this is just an image at Frankfort, where you can easily hop in a canoe and enjoy the water resources there on the Kentucky River, but it's been used for moving goods up and down the river for many years, and that continues on. But it certainly is a great place for recreation as well, and it supplies a lot of drinking water to many of Kentucky's residents. So we'll drop down south a little bit to the Upper Cumberland River Basin. And the Cumberland River is kind of interesting. You may know this, but it originates in southeastern Kentucky, and then it flows south and drops into Tennessee before it comes back up into Kentucky in the western part of the state. And so, of course, again, lots of diverse landscape, but we do have a lot of agriculture that happens in the Upper Cumberland Basin. This is one of my favorite images that was taken near Burkesville, and of this confluence of a stream coming into the river. And I really like to see, Billy mentioned earlier, trees and water coming together. And this is just a gorgeous example of a forested stream buffer that is protecting the water resources there in the Upper Cumberland Basin. And so we've worked some with some of our ag producers there. So fair amount of beef cattle that are produced there, as well as a lot of meadows and pollinator habitat. So these two images are from the same farm, and it was just a nice field visit to see this coming together of our natural resources and agricultural production in that Upper Cumberland River Basin. So now we're going to move a little further west to the Salt River Basin. The Salt River headwaters are in the Casey-Boyle County areas of the state, and the mouth, so where the water dumps out into the Ohio River, is at West Point, which is in Bullitt County, Kentucky. We go back there. Amber Hawkins is our basin coordinator, fairly new to that position, and I've worked with several other basin coordinators. Also, Salt River has an active watershed watch group. So these are volunteers that monitor the streams and rivers throughout the state. So I mentioned Division of Water does a lot of monitoring, but also we use a lot of volunteers throughout Kentucky to monitor our water quality. And so these images that you're seeing now are of a field day that we had with one of our own woodland owners in Bullitt County, Kentucky, near Claremont. And so the Salt River includes areas of the knobs. And so you see a mixture of agriculture, you see a mixture of forestry and forest production, as well as some urban areas sprinkled in. So Salt River also has a little bit of everything going on there. So next we'll talk about the Green and Trade Water rivers, and many of you are probably familiar with the Green River because of the Mammoth Cave area, and that is a very significant part of the Green and Trade Water rivers basin. Colin Duncan is our basin coordinator there. And these are just a few images of some exploration that I've done on the Green River. I got to go on a canoe trip and this spring. And when you go on a canoe trip with a bunch of biologists, you don't go very far, very fast, because they're always stopping to look at what's there and what's hiding under a rock or what's in the water. And so it was a really fun day of exploration, but a great place to fish also because of the biodiversity that's there. And here's just an image of the Mammoth Cave biosphere region. There's a really neat story map that I found that gives a nice history of the Mammoth Cave area. And it's not just the cave, but also the surrounding landscape because of the karst geology, making it a really sensitive area and thus a need to preserve and protect the resources there, and also a very biodiverse part of Kentucky. And then finally, we'll wrap up with the Four River Basin area. And so that's the far western part of the state. Rhonda Lamb is our basin coordinator in that area. And Rhonda has a history of working with our conservation districts as well as Murray State University. And she is very well versed in all of the land uses that are going on in the western part of the state. She does a lot of work with our ag producers there. So these are some examples of best management practices that have been put on the ground to support production agriculture, as well as support our water resources. So heavy use traffic pads where we have a lot of livestock, some rotational grazing that's been put in, as well as some septic system repair. So still we have a lot of septic systems throughout the state, and having that on-site wastewater treatment being effective for protecting our water resources is super important as well. And you might, I'm sure, be familiar with the recreational opportunities that abound in Western Kentucky. So Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley and land between the lakes, of course, are the ones that pop out, as well as Clarks River National Wildlife Refuge. So lots of opportunities to explore our natural resources in the western part of the state in the Four Rivers area. So I'll stop there and just kind of ask you a question. In recognition of World Rivers Day, which river are you going to explore next?
Well, Mandy, that was a great presentation. That's like, oh, there we go. I was like, I was blocked out. I really love that, because I guess I knew Kentucky had a lot of rivers, but you just don't really realize how they're all connected and how they flow together, flow together. And sorry. And that one picture was absolutely the best picture that I have ever seen with the trees in the water. I think that was just wonderful.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. And you know what? As I was putting this together, there's like I just gave you a brief snapshot, and I'm sure some of
Right.
our viewers are living in those watersheds, going, "Man, she didn't say anything about this or this or this or this." So one, I will say, if y'all have stories and pictures, please send them to me. I would love to incorporate those. But also, there's just so much more to explore and so much more to learn. This was really just a brief snapshot. So get out there and explore Kentucky's water resources.
Dr. Gumbert, loved it, loved it,
Love
loved it.
it.
It was really good.
Thanks.
Now I'm like, all right, she has to do one for each of the rivers that we have in Kentucky.
Ooh.
Well, that's what I started with, and I'm like, they gave me 10 minutes, and I've
Oh,
already taken
so,
more.
so we're going to start parsing you out over the course of a year, right? So that you
I-
That would be awesome if
That
y'all
would
want
be
to do
fun.
that.
That would be fun.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it would be neat. Maybe we could throw in some other little kind of, other
Yeah.
stuff too with that too. But
Yeah.
no, really
Yeah.
appreciate you, and I think the tourism department ought to hire you for being such a good promoter of, Kentucky and all.
As long as they would, I just, I thought I need to challenge myself to canoe or boat or kayak in all of the river basins, and so I'm like mentally making note of where I have field trips I need to plan.
Oh, no.
Love it. Love it.
Thanks,
It's
y'all.
really good. No, thank you. Really appreciate the contribution and drawing our attention to something just so important. So good work. Really good work.
Thanks.
Appreciate it so much.
All right, we're going to stay with the water theme. And
Now we're going to talk about something that actually lives in the river.
yeah, many of the rivers she was talking about. I guess we'll find out real soon. Dr. Springer, he couldn't be with us live today, but he does have a segment he put together for us today. It's on river otters in Kentucky. So Renee, I'm going to go ahead and get that queued up.
That'll be great.
Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking about otters and a little bit about all otters, but specifically otters and river otters in Kentucky, which have become much more common here in the last few years for many reasons, but they are definitely things that we see much more often than we did, say, 3-4 decades ago. So let's jump right into it. Let's give you a little framework about otters in general and otters of the world. All otters are carnivores, and they're all part of the mustelid family or the weasel family. And many people can kind of put that together. They look very similar in terms of their body structure, where you have a very long body, where the head goes is narrow and cylinder-like, then goes all the way back to a tail that's usually pretty elongated to help them with balance or swimming. They range in size from very small, right? Mustelids in general, weasels and very small, where you have the little least weasel that's like 6 inches long total, all the way up to our largest otter here, which is the giant otter, which is found in South America. But in terms of otters in general, right, there's 13 species worldwide. Many of these, unfortunately, are endangered or threatened. And actually, we have one of these species is now extinct, the Japanese otter, which was declared extinct about 3 decades ago, with the last known individual seen in the 70s. So we're down to actually 12 species worldwide, and many of these species have lots of subspecies similar to the river otter, but they're found throughout Europe, Asia, Africa, North, Central, and South America, living along or near or within various sized bodies of water. And we even include two that are marine in nature, where we have the sea otter that many of us are very familiar with, which is found along the northwest coast of North America, right from Alaska down along Canada and into California. And then we have the South American version, which is the marine otter that is also in the Pacific Ocean that runs along the coast of Central and South America. And they commonly, right, they're carnivores, so they're meat eaters, are commonly consuming a lot of fish, crustaceans, river on the non-marine side, they're consuming amphibians, small mammals, and birds even on occasion. Now, the largest otter in the world is, as I mentioned, the giant otter, which is the largest mustelid in the world, which is coming in at just about 2 meters long. So a little over 6 feet, roughly 6 feet, and 34 kilograms. So upwards of, if you do 2.2 times there, you're looking at 70, 80 pounds in many instances. So that's a very large weasel. The smallest otter is the Asian small-clawed otter, which is only coming in at about 2 to 3 feet at most. And it weighs roughly about 12 pounds as an adult. And you can see the pictures there of those two species, the giant otter in the top and the small clawed otter in the bottom there. They have very similar appearances to each other. Their facial structure, their bodies, they're all very similar in structure and appearance. With some coloration variation, you can see the white patch in the giant otter. But most cases, they are dark furred animals with brownish to dark brown color, with their bellies being a slightly lighter color, brown/silvery mix. And that's to help with camouflage as they're swimming around. So the dark on the top really helps conceal them from predators above them. And the lighter colored belly is for their prey that are looking up. It makes it harder for them to distinguish that otter as it swims through the water. Now, we have within Kentucky the North American river otter. So this is our species, and as you can see the range, it goes all the way down to Florida in the southeast, and it kind of comes up and goes around the plain states in the Midwest, and then goes through Canada and comes back around along the Pacific Northwest coast there, and into many of the internal states as well. These guys are a fairly long-lived species, upwards of 8-9+ years. And the females are going to give birth to about 3 to 5 pups every spring. Just like all their other counterparts there, their primary diet is fish, which sometimes gets them into trouble. We'll talk a little about that later. But crustaceans, so freshwater clams and mussels, amphibians, frogs, crayfish, small mammals if they find them along the shoreline, and then also birds on occasion. And these guys primarily spend most of their time in or along riverbanks. It's estimated that they spend about 20-ish%, 25% of their time in the actual water itself, where the vast majority of their time then is spent not in the water. It can be basking on the banks or searching for food along the banks, or consuming the food along the banks. So they don't really spend all their time within the actual water itself. Many times these guys are very social. The vast majority of the species are very social, and they will get into large groups, especially the females when they have the pups. They'll regularly see them all together, or even more than one female in pups. I think the highest number documented was around 25 individuals together at once. That's especially true with the giant otter in the south. They tend to get in large groups as well. And these groups are called romps or rafts if you're in the marine setting, right? So the sea otters tend to get in what are called rafts, and they float around together on their backs. Sometimes you'll see the cute pictures of them holding hands, which is not so they lose each other, but to help keep their pads warm on their hands. This is done to help both in terms of feeding efficiency and hunting, as well as a way of keeping them safe from predators. They're called a romp because of the playful nature they tend to have. They romp around a lot. Many of you may have seen that video of the otters in the zoo where they're chasing the butterfly around their enclosure together. So that's kind of why it's called a romp, is because of that playful nature they often have. Many times they're very curious and will come up quite close to investigate things that are new in their environment. Now, river otters populations had declined drastically, especially in the late 1800s and turn of the century into the 20th century, were very limited in many places. Their range contracted. They were, I believe, it was about 12 states they were extirpated from. And due to stocking efforts and limiting harvests and adding a lot of protections to them, their population has drastically increased. And most of those efforts were in the 70s, where as of 1976, there were over 4,000 otters reintroduced into 21 different states within the United States. And in many cases, those efforts have really resulted in large, very stable or growing populations of river otters. Now, they are sometimes confused with several other semi-aquatic fur bearers. So these are mammals that we consider a fur bearer, so an animal that was harvested for fur. And semi-aquatic meaning they live most of their life within aquatic environments. But they all have very similar appearances. And then, if you're on a boat, say on the weekend, you see what you think is an otter, it could also be one of these species that are commonly found throughout Kentucky and in most of the range of the river otter itself. Excuse me. The one that's probably the most confusing due to the similarity in size is the beaver. It often will swim around with its head above the water, so like otters do. And size-wise, it is about similar length. Weight-wise, beavers can be a lot larger, but most of that weight is hidden underneath the water when they're swimming around. In addition, one of the cool things that beavers have is they have a pretty good relationship with otters, where otters and beavers have been found in the same dens together. Otters will often use old beaver dens or currently active beaver dens as part of their daily resting locations, or even to have their pups in, especially if it's an abandoned beaver den or lodge. So these two are commonly found together. There's no direct competition within them because beavers are herbivores and otters are carnivores. Beavers are large enough that they are not considered a prey source for otters. So they get along quite well, as best as animals can do. So you will often see them in the same water bodies together. The closest relative that we would see to river otters that are often confused is the mink, which is that mustelid that's in the top right corner there. The beaver is in the top left, and the beaver and otter together is in the bottom right. But the mink, the American mink, is another weasel within Kentucky. It is about a third to even less in size. They tend to only get to about a foot to a foot and a half long as adults. And they are similar to otters in the fact that they spend a lot of time in and around water bodies along riverbanks, ditches. They consume a lot of fish as well, and amphibians, and so their dietary overlap is quite close. It's just their size is very different, which allows the otters to eat a lot larger prey items than the mink does. But mink behave and act in a similar fashion. They run around very quickly. They move upwards of 15 kilometers a night. They swim to go after fish, though not as common as the river otter does, but they will do it. So you may see a quick glimpse of an animal moving in a very weasel-like fashion. And if it's a very small animal, it would be probably the mink rather than an otter. They're also a little darker often than river otters in terms of their blackish brown appearance rather than the somewhat more chestnutty brown otter can have. Lastly, the one that is probably least likely to be confused with a river otter is the muskrat, which is in the bottom left there. It is small, much smaller than a river otter. Its tail is also hairless. And it's often you can clearly see the body is above the water when it swims. as opposed to, say, the river otter or the beaver that may keep only most of their head above the water. So those are the ones that can be easily confused with river otters if you're out and about in Kentucky. Now, some fun otter facts. We'll switch it up. I went through all the natural history there and kind of got a little long, but sea otters are actually have the densest fur of all mammals, and it's helped keep them warm in those environments that they exist in, right? So floating around on the coast of Alaska in January is not exactly warm. So they have to have that there in order to survive. Otters, because of their nature of how they gather food, they spend a lot of time under the water chasing prey or grabbing mussels or clams from the bottom of the river body. They can stay underwater for upwards of 8 minutes at a time to help them gather their food or escape predators. In addition, these guys are tool users. They are known to use tools to open those clams or mussels to get at that food source. So there are many times documented situations where they're using a rock to bust open the shells on those gathered food items. Now, within Kentucky, status of river otters in Kentucky, our population has been and is probably still growing, especially over the last 20 or 30 years. And as an indicator of that, there is a rather not completely open harvest to them, but a generous harvest of upwards of 10 otters within the year for trappers. There are some zone limits. There are areas of the state where we tend to have more otters than others. So the western counties there shaded in orange are a much higher river otter density and population than those in the east. So you're allowed to take more otters out of those counties relative to the eastern counties. And due to the nature of otters and how they behave and the numbers that we now have, we're starting to see some human-wildlife interactions and conflicts that are not necessarily great for both sides of the story. So part of that comes in the fact that their behavior comes into play here. They are a species that uses what's called a latrine. So they will defecate in the same area and leave their scat in the same area, often very close to water bodies where it's easy in and out access, and they consume food. It's used as a scent post for animals, so it's good to have in areas that are very obvious. Unfortunately, that could mean docks and boats and whatnot. Also fish, being the main component of their diet. If you're running a pay to fish lake, pay fish lake, having an otter come in and wipe out your entire pond is a possibility because they're such good fishing. And on top of that, they can get into other issues like chasing chickens on occasion. Not common at all. Mink are much more common than that, but it does happen here and there. One of the funny things is there's actually been in 2021 there was a pack of beavers. Well, I'm going to put that in air quotes here in Alaska that were in a suburban area, in a suburban pond, that were actually attacking and chasing people. They were rather aggressive, and Alaska had to step in. The Department of Natural Resources there had to step in, Fish and Game, to deal with them. Because they had chased several dogs and also chased children. So there are their personality can cause them problems. They are a pretty ferocious predator for anything that is smaller than them. They're incredibly fast. They've strong jaws and pretty big teeth. So it's not something that I would usually worry about whenever I'd see an otter, but evidently there's a situation. This is the only one I found of that situation. So, if you're having otter issues, how do you then prevent them? So this is how we deal with the human-wildlife interactions and conflicts. And a big part of this is a lot of times otters are hopping on boats, hopping on docks. You may have things like cat food, or you're storing fish or things that smell like fish. Otters are looking for that food source. So if you can find a way to properly store those items so that otters don't get that reward, it can kind of help keep that interest level a little lower. That's not going to solve the situation in all cases, right? So if an otter is coming up and using your dock as a latrine, it's really hard to deal with that by just getting rid of food. You can just, get rid of the scat and move it to a different area and hope that they stop using it, but unfortunately it becomes a problem. You can try to use barriers. Effective ones include electric, right? So you can try to put shock them from getting into places. So this works really well on small ponds if you're trying to prevent an otter from getting into your pond or a koi pond. If you know an otter's around, those electric barriers, like they do for chicken netting, like the electric netting for chickens to protect chickens from predators, will also work to protect your pond from otters. In addition, if they can only access those areas by climbing up out of the water in one location, you can put a fence up and around that, or a different kind of barrier to keep them from being able to climb up, which can help limit access and also problems caused by access. There are some folks that have suggested repellents, whether that's pepper-based repellents or other items that may make the area less conducive to them being around. They are mammals, so they're using both smell and taste to determine if they like things. So if you use those kind of deterrents, it may have a success in keeping those otters away. But there's not a whole lot of scientific evidence on how effective they are. Lastly, if you really have a big problem, we see this a lot where otters will cause thousands of dollars worth of damage on boats if they get into them. In trapping those otters to remove them, you can, because of the status of the populations are so strong. This is now a method that is perfectly legal. If you're having an issue, trappers can protect and get rid of those otters that are causing the problem using either what we call a body gripping trap, or a cage trap, or a Comstock trap, which is a really specialized cage trap for otters and beavers. If you need some other information relative to things like otter harvest or how to deal with problem otters, we have both our extension publication that can be found here in the bottom link there, or if you need to reach out to Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, information on otters and other fur bearers can be found at that link, as well as you can just give them a call and talk to the agency personnel that can give you all the information you may need relative to legal routes or obtaining tags, because otters are or have a protection, so they have to have a fur. If you have a trapper that harvests an otter, they want to sell the pelt or maintain or keep the pelt, you need to obtain what's called a CITES tag from the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. And that holds true if you're dealing with legal harvest, or also having problematic otters. You want to make sure that you have their CITES tag situation well understood. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
I can see where they could cause problems, but they just look so cute. I mean,
unless they're getting in your stuff, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then you're like, oh no. Yeah, I could see where they could be a problem, but they are really super cute. And I have seen some of those, videos where they're, on their back swimming, and they're so cute. But
A big thanks to Dr. Springer for putting that together
Definitely.
for us. Do appreciate that.
We do.
Yeah, so we'll kind of keep going on the water theme, but
Right.
now we're talking about some sweet water.
Sweet
right?
water.
We talked about maybe some of that sweet sap that comes from our maple trees that we turn into some beautiful maple syrup. So got Mr. John Duvall. John, if you want to join us.
Welcome. We appreciate you being on the show. I think this is the first time you've been on the show, right?
It is my first time.
First time or
Your last.
Thank you, Billy and Renee, for having me on today. I'm here to talk to you about our state organization, not so much about how you make maple syrup, because you can talk about that for hours and hours. But if you don't know, maple sap is actually like 99% water, so it kind of fits in well with the talk today. And that other 2% is sugar, and you have to boil it for a very long time to where it gets to that 66% sugar. But like I said, my main purpose today is to talk about our state organization, the Kentucky Maple Syrup Association. It was originally started back in around 2017 by a few producers in far eastern Kentucky, Letcher County and Martin, and I believe Harlan County. And those guys started the organization, wanted to be able to reach other producers around the state. And some of those waterways that we've mentioned earlier in our presentation, unfortunately, some of those got too much water a couple years ago, and those producers, their community was affected. And so the last few years, they've been trying to help rebuild their community. And our association has been going through a rebuilding phase this past year. So they asked me to come on earlier this year to help guide our association to gain more producers across the state and help educate people about maple syrup here in Kentucky. The sky is the limit with what we could do here. We have a wide range of producers in our state. We have some people who tap, 5 to 10 trees and just do it for their own family. And we encourage them to be a part of our association. And we have some that tap 500 to 1,000 trees and do it commercially. And they make all kinds of good things, not just maple syrup, but maple candy and maple cookies and maple cotton candy. There's all types of great things you can do with maple syrup. And so we've been working with UK Forestry and Ohio State Forestry the last few months to help come up with some events, some educational events this fall. We just had one this past Monday night, a little webinar with UK and Ohio State. And I believe that was recorded. And if you sign up for registration, I believe you can watch it here in the future once it's posted live. We got 2 more great events coming up. In October the 16th, Monday, we're going to have a hands-on workshop at the Boone County Education Center. We're going to have our friends from Ohio State come down again. We're going to work on some tubing techniques, some hands-on experience with that. And then in November the 4th, we're going to have what we call our Kentucky Maple School. And we're really excited about that. That's going to be in Berea at their Forestry Outreach Center. And we got a lot of great presenters coming down from Maine, Wisconsin, Northern Ohio, a couple from West Virginia. So it's going to be a great day of learning everything about maple syrup. And we may even meet a Friday night, the night before. We're still in the planning phases to do some precision tapping and talk with Berea College's forester as well and what they're doing down there in Berea. So those are some events we got coming up, and we don't want to forget in 2024, we'll have the Kentucky Maple Day, where our producers will open up their farms and you can come and tour their farms and learn about the process of making maple syrup. In the past, that has run around the first Saturday of February. We're still in planning phases to see how weather and some factors about which day we want to do that in the future. Us maple syrup producers, we look for cold weather in the winter. We're almost like meteorologists. We try to forecast when it's going to be cold because we need those cold nights and warm days to help that sap flow up the tree. So to be a member, we have a membership application that's online. It's on our website, which is kymaple.com. If you scroll to the bottom, you can see join now, or there's also the contact button as well. And our email is kmsa.kymaple@gmail.com. Both are on our website. And we also do try to start advertising through Facebook as well with some of those events that are coming up. But the registration is now open, I believe, for the October 16th event, and that is through UK's Forestry website. They're helping us out with our registration and helping us keep us organized with that. And the registration for the Maple School will be open fairly soon once we get all the details lined out. So we hope you'd like to reach out to us if you're thinking about wanting to be a maple syrup producer. Get in contact with us, and we would love to help you become a future producer. So I believe that's all I have, Billy. If anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer whatever there is.
Well, John, I really appreciate it. And Renee, I don't know, would you mind to throw that image back up one more time? And John, thank you for doing that. I wanted to really commend you and the other leadership of the Kentucky Maple Syrup Association. You all have really taken on yourselves to kind of, get that organization reinvigorated and going. So, I see the map there, and I want you to bring that up, Renee, because we know there's a lot of other producers in those other counties, right?
Yes.
And they're just unaware. They may not realize that there's this association or this group. If you're a county extension agent or somebody else, please let them know that there's this organization that's trying to work and support support maple syrup producers. And I would encourage you, if you are thinking about becoming a producer or you are producing, join this organization. It's a great networking opportunity to kind of learn from fellow producers on what's working and what's not working. And you know, there's so many opportunities if we kind of combine forces and work together. So if you were thinking about being involved in maple syrup, I would strongly encourage you to join this group. It will be well worth your cost of membership because you'll get a lot of good content out of it and a lot of great relationships that you'll be able to draw upon as you kind of go through that process. So I just wanted to mention that, John. I really appreciate you again and the whole group that's come together. I put a couple of links in there, one for the workshop and then one for your all's maple syrup website or your association's website as well. Those are in the chat pod for folks. But again, we really do appreciate what you all are trying to do. And you know, maple syrup, a lot of people may think that you can't do it here in Kentucky, but that's not the case, right? And we certainly can here. We just maybe have to be a little more diligent in kind of timing and stuff than maybe some of our friends up north. But we make a great product here. I've tasted it all across the state and it is really good. And I would say Kentucky makes the best maple syrup.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a little bit biased, of course, but it is really good stuff. And you know, that Maple Day you mentioned, John, we had more than 2,000 people, documented customers, come out last year and visit farms all across the state, and we'll be promoting that as well. But if you are really kind of thinking about it, I encourage you to go ahead and get engaged with this organization because we got these other events coming up, and it's a great way to kind of learn and process. You know, before you get maybe running, you can kind of learn to walk a little bit, and there's going to be vendors and other stuff at the Maple School. So again, y'all are doing great stuff, John. We're just glad to be supportive of what you all are trying to do. And I would encourage all of our maple producers to join this organization now.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Billy.
The thing about it is too, though, Billy, yeah, I mean, if you already are a producer and you're trying to get your name out and your word, the word out that you're doing that, this is a great way to be able to do that as well.
It certainly is, Renee. So, getting on the map out there for folks is really big, and being part of this association is a great way to do that for your operation, right? And as it stands right now, John, we cannot produce enough maple syrup in Kentucky, right? Every drop gets sold basically immediately. It's put in a bottle. So there's just not, so don't worry about that. Like you're going to be kind of competing to, we got way far to go before we're actually competing with one another. So there's plenty of space for all of us out there. So get involved.
There's millions of trees out there that are just waiting to be tapped.
That's right. And you bring up a good point. It's a non-timber forest product, so it's a way to derive value from our forest. It's also a wonderful thing from like an agritourism standpoint, right? For our producers, they can do some stuff in the winter when maybe other agricultural operations aren't as busy, and it's a great way to introduce the community to their farm and what else they have. Maybe more than maple syrup. Maybe they also do eggs or fresh produce or meat, right? So it's really fits in really nice with our agricultural producers here in Kentucky. If you've ever done honey or sorghum, there's a lot of similarities with this. Again, I encourage you to, if you're serious about this, then get involved with the association.
Yes. Thank you, Billy. Thank you.
Thank you for being on, John. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and we'll have you back again as we get closer to some of these events, and we'll, keep promoting it the best we can.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
John. All right. So lots of water.
Water. But you know what? Water is pretty much in everything. So it's a good topic to be talking about.
Yeah, it really is. And we appreciate you all being with us. Thanks for that today. You can check out this episode and all the past episodes on FromTheWoodsToday.com. And we'd love to see if you've got anything you want us to talk about. There's a little survey form on there you can complete. Let us know if you're like, you all should cover this. And we might very well do that.
You never know. We might do that. I actually got an email from somebody while we were on the show saying, hey, we need you to cover this. So I was like, okay. So you never know. So just keep those ideas rolling. We need them every week. So I'm always looking for some kind of ideas, as long as it has to do something with our forestry and natural resources. That's really the only thing I make it has to be about.
Yes. Yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, folks, again, we appreciate you. Big thanks to all of our presenters. Thanks again to Dr. Gumbert and Dr. Springer and John Duvall with the Kentucky Maple Syrup Association. A lot of great content on today's show. And Renee, thank you as always for all you do to keep this thing running.
Sure. We greatly appreciate it. And we will see you next Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
From the woods today.